Good afternoon or good morning. I'm Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association. And today we'll be talking about impacting public policy in our region. And I will silence my phone because, of course, that's what happens as soon as one gets on a Zoom. Okay, so I want to first talk about the media landscape in our region. So the Press Association covers Maryland, Delaware, and DC. We do have news media members in every jurisdiction in our region. So all of the discussion about news deserts and how horrible the outlook is for local news is not really applicable to our region. There should, and we always like there to be more news outlets than there are, but there is a newspaper or online website in every jurisdiction in Maryland and the 3 counties in Delaware, and of course in DC. What our members are seeing is more limited resources than maybe there were in the past. So there's some stresses around staffing, finding an appropriate pipeline of young talent into the industry, especially diverse talent. Because of staff shortages, it's often more difficult to do investigative work because that's sort of long-term, big picture work rather than getting out stories on the daily. And then, of course, training also comes into that. If you think of decreased staff, that means everyone's kind of putting their oar in and rowing, as opposed to really cultivating talent, providing comprehensive training and mentoring as we may have had in the past. We're also externally seeing a culture of opacity in government. And what I mean by that is ordinarily, you would expect public officials, government officials, to recognize that there is a responsibility and a duty to the public to be more transparent with public records and access. We're seeing, and this is not a short-term or problem that's just cropped up, but this is over the past, decade probably, that we're seeing more public officials sort of take the attitude of, well, sue me if you don't like it. I'm not going to give you this record, or I'm going to delay. And so, of course, that's not every government official, but that seems to have an increasing prevalence. And we're also seeing the Maryland judiciary kind of pushing back, especially with some problems that we've seen around case search in Maryland, that access is being diminished. And so there are few officials that are willing to really discuss these issues with us, which is a disappointment. Now, MDDC focuses on a couple of different areas to move public policy. One of the most straightforward ways to do that is we lobby in the legislatures of Maryland, Delaware, and the District of Columbia. Our primary focus areas tend to be reporter access, transparency, and public notice. So those are all around sort of that right to know. I always think of it as a three-legged stool. So you have the FOIA Act, or the Public Information Act, as a very clear right to know. You have public notice also, which requires government entities or public bodies to post very specific things in their in newspapers of record. And then we also will focus on business issues to a greater or lesser extent. We try not to speak out unless we are the only ones who can really carry that issue. And welcome to those who have just joined us. We've just gotten started and we're recording, so you can catch up later. And so the other ways that we shape public policy are really discussing policy issues. So we've been experimenting with member-wide projects. This past March, we did a Sunshine Week reporting package with the help of Miranda Spivak around implementing Anton's Law. So in Maryland, Anton's Law is the sort of vernacular for the bill that has reclassified police misconduct records to make them subject to the PIA, to the Public Information Act. And so that law had gone into effect in October. We had heard some issues about how that was being implemented, that police departments were not forthcoming with those misconduct records. It was difficult to get information and nothing had really changed. So we examined that at a macro level, and this kind of goes back to that investigative reporting that some of our members don't have the capacity to do as much of that as they would like. So the association is working to step into that role in a very small and specific way with this type of macro reporting that can be localized for members. We're also seeing another collaborative journalism project come up, this time in Delaware, through the Solutions Journalism Network. And the collaborative journalism project is really a consortium or a collaboration between many of the news outlets in Delaware. It's just getting its feet under themselves. But I think this can be a very interesting model, and we can learn a lot about how to report on a wider level about topics of importance. And then, of course, we also focus on supplementing the resources of our members as much as we're able. So we speak out on issues of importance. So it's whenever you're shaping public policy, we want to be an entity that officials and advocates and even the public say, well, what does MDDC think about that? If it's one of our issues, we want to be at the table. And so one of the best ways to kind of raise our profile is to speak out on issues of importance. Recently, we weighed in on Judge Grigsby in the District Court of Maryland sealing motions quickly and perhaps unnecessarily in the Marilyn Mosby trial. And so that's at the request of our members, we will throw our support behind efforts that are important to the industry. We also, in terms of like thinking about the pipeline of talent, we have our jobs board that connects members to open job postings. And most interestingly, we have really developed our internship program. This is a summer program that's administered by our Press Foundation with some coaching and mentoring components. And so this may feel like it's a little astray from public policy, but essentially if there isn't enough staff to fully report on these issues, public policy is shaped without the feedback and without the objective reporting of news media. So it's important to have those voices. And then, of course, the training that we do so to help people sharpen their skills as journalists. Now, more specifically, I want to drill down to the issues that we have been working on legislatively. And certainly jump in if you have a question or if something doesn't make sense. As I said, we lobby in Maryland, Delaware, and the district. Maryland's session ended in mid-April. Delaware's is still going strong and will until June 30th. And so around access and transparency in Maryland, we'll go through that first. Our anti-SLAPP bill, which we've been carrying for several years now, did not make it out of committee. For a variety of reasons. We may take a run at that again next year. We will want to flag for everyone that there is going to be pretty substantial revisions to the Public Information Act that will take effect July 1st. That's from a bill that was passed last session with a delayed start date. And we'll be doing some training around that in collaboration with the Public Information Act Ombudsman. Cameras in the courtroom is an issue that's come up. Certainly the pandemic has fed into that topic as more courtrooms were doing proceedings by Zoom, and the court watch movement is really starting to take shape and act with a little bit more vibrancy in our communities. So we also are seeing just a real dig in their heels, mistrust or unwillingness on the part of the judiciary to even entertain the idea of cameras in the courtroom. This is an issue that we'll go back at consistently. It's something that's important to our members. It's important for public transparency for the judicial process. And I think Maryland is behind the times on this. There are several other states that have developed cameras in the courtroom programs, and the world has not fallen. So we will continue to advocate on that issue. We're also seeing in Maryland, and I would imagine this is going to spread to other jurisdictions and areas, the recent spate, there's been a lot of activity legislatively around expunging people's records. So, and there's been some focus on automatic expungement as well. And that kind of wreaks havoc with case search. So case search is a publicly accessible database, essentially, that is administered by the court system. There has been, in Maryland, there's been some significant changes to case search to accommodate some of the expungement bills that have passed, but also just from a technical perspective, they're theoretically updating it, but they seem to be limiting access, perhaps inadvertently, as their updates go through. And the courts have been, at this point, unwilling to speak with us about those problems. When it's a huge issue and the big outcry, usually some movement can happen, but it's sort of a specialized group of people that work within case search. So that's an ongoing issue that we will continue to work on. And one, before we get to Delaware, Maryland's, we're looking at a primary this July. It's danced around a little bit, and every seat in the General Assembly is up for grabs. Maryland has just gone through its once in a decade process of redistricting, and so everything is on the table. Legislators who have been in Annapolis for a long time are now in slightly adjusted districts. Everyone's kind of eyeing where they're going next. Some of our strongest proponents, like Brooke Learman of Baltimore City, who carried that PIA bill of last year, are running for other offices. For instance, Delegate Learman is running for comptroller, which means that no matter what the outcome of the comptroller's race is, she will not be in the Maryland legislature. So it's going to be a significant time of change, and we'll be monitoring very closely as we continue to develop relationships and seek champions for our issues. We are fortunate that Maryland is appreciative in general of its news media. But that doesn't mean that there aren't bills that act to our detriment, which we'll see in just a minute. Around access and transparency in Delaware, which is still going, still in session, the LIBOR revisions to police misconduct records, which is basically the Delaware version of Anton's law, is on the ready list. I'm not sure if it will pass this session, but that was a carryover from last year. Delaware has a 2-year session, so this is the second year of their session. The other sort of carryover bill that we're really closely monitoring around access and transparency is this vexatious requesters bill. It is on the ready list, which means it could be voted by the legislature at any time. And this would allow government officials in Delaware to essentially say, oh, this person has asked too many times, have a request that's overbroad, could label those individuals as a vexatious requester and refuse to fill their FOIA requests. So that's a very dangerous precedent. It hasn't really moved. It was on the ready list last session, and then there was a public outcry. So it is unlikely to move, but anything is possible at the end of a session. Any questions? I feel like I've been just motor mouthing. So any questions on access or transparency or anything we've covered thus far?
No, I think I'm okay.
All right. Well, moving on then. One of our other big issues is public notice. And so it has been, there was a lot of activity on this subject in Maryland. All of it stalled and did not pass out of committee. But I think it's noteworthy that we had so many bills on this issue from so many different counties. They tend to come as local bills to change the requirements of what is required to be published in a newspaper of record. Public notice is required to be in a printed publication. We saw a push from Dorchester County to change the definition of newspapers to include online only publications or online versions, theoretically, of traditional papers of record. We have also seen in St. Mary's County a push to include free newspapers. Right now, a newspaper to carry public notice needs to have a periodicals permit, a second-class periodicals permit, which is a designation from the post office, which requires that a subscriber list is maintained and that there are certain standards in terms of editorial versus advertising content, frequency of publication, and so forth. So that also stalled. And then there was a push to just go straight to online notice from Charles County. And some of the issues around many or some governments feel like, oh, we could just post it on our on the government website and, get the word out by Facebook and whatnot. And that's the newspapers are in the business of audience development and sharing critical information with their communities. And that simply is not an appropriate way to serve notice. We've also seen some very super targeted specific bills. One came out this last session from Montgomery County about allowing municipal charters to have notice for certain municipalities to serve notice by newsletter produced by the community. That did stall, and I'm not sure that it will be back, but this is a hot topic that continually, it takes a lot of focus and attention on the part of MDDC to navigate. In Delaware, there was House Bill 274 was passed and signed in late April, where name change notices no longer require publication in the newspaper. This is an idea that passed in Maryland, I think last year, maybe the year before, that comes out of some of the transgender privacy and domestic violence survivors' concerns about publishing their name and personal information in the newspaper. That is many people and many courts, however, still encourage name change notices, and there hasn't been a huge effect in Maryland. So we'll see how things progress in Delaware. And I always like to put our little plug for the public notice website. MDDC does aggregate all of the public notices from our member websites in one place for easy access and good data analysis. So I encourage you all to check that out. In terms of business issues, now, as I mentioned, unless we can bring something very significant and unique to the table, we tend just to monitor these business issues. and there have been more as time has gone on. In Maryland, we saw the introduction and passage of environmental producer responsibility. This is an idea coming out of the conservation movement, where it is, rather than you and me being responsible for picking up our soda cans and recycling them and so forth, bills such as these, and we're seeing them across the country, are shifting responsibility for that recycling and waste management back to the packager or producer that that initially is putting out the items to be recycled. So in Maryland, it has not affected us directly, and I don't believe that it will, because the bill was amended in the interim to leave out essentially news media. It's only around packaging in Maryland, but it is an issue that we do monitor and keep on top of. We haven't seen that crop up in Delaware, but sometimes, obviously legislators are looking at what others are doing. In Maryland, we did have, both in Maryland and in Delaware, paid family and medical leave passed. This is a big deal. In Maryland, I'll just kind of run down. This was Senate Bill 275, and the governor did veto it, and the legislature overrode his veto. And so this bill, or this law now, creates a paid family and medical leave insurance program that's funded by both the employer and employee contributions via an additional payroll tax. So the contributions will begin October of 2023. So the implementation has been pushed back a little bit, but it covers individuals down to, it's not just full-time individuals. Workers will be entitled to benefits as long as they have worked at least 680 hours over the trailing 12-month period before the leave begins. So that's about 13 hours a week. So this is going to dig a little bit deeper than many of those programs. And it does not, employers with 14 or fewer workers do not have to contribute the employer program, but you do have to collect the employee program. So that is something that really will be a shift for Maryland businesses and will affect our members. Now in Delaware, paid leave passed as well, and that again is funded by both employer and employee contributions. Will be a payroll tax. In Delaware, it's going to be a little bit, you have to work more hours to qualify for the leave. So the covered individuals or workers will include those who have been employed for at least 12 months by the employer and have worked for at least 1,250 hours during that trailing year. So that's about 26 hours a week that someone would need to work to be eligible. But it does cover parental leave is rolled into this. If you have 10 or more employees, you'll be eligible for up to 12 weeks of paid leave in the first year after birth, or adoption or foster care of a child. It includes medical and caregiving leave. And the contributions are pushed back. Maryland's begins in 2023. Delaware will begin January 1st, 2025. So these are significant changes. This is coupled with hikes in the minimum wage that we've seen in both of those states over the past couple of years, and just signals that both Maryland and Delaware are very much looking at workers' rights. We've seen some scheduling bills come in that won't really affect, I believe, many of our members, but it is an issue that we watch. So any questions about business or public notice while we're here? All right, I'm going to cruise right on because that is the legislative policy outlook. We are working very hard to shift the conversation around news media and the issues that are important to us. One of the other ways, and we'll continue to to bring our message and the perspective of our members to the legislature, and also to support our members as we look to influence public policy or share more information about public policy. For instance, going back to our Sunshine Week project, we just applied for a grant, which hopefully we will get, we'll know in June, that would support reporting around banned books. We know that's going to be a major topic of conversation. It already is in legislatures around the country. And we've seen some of that discussion around sort of parents' rights and curriculum. And we would expect that there will be discussion around maybe not outright bans on various books, but certainly conversation. And we want to make sure that our legislators are fully informed about what's going on locally. This seems to happen more in school boards, and it's a very, very local issue. And so by providing kind of macro reporting across the region on specific topics, members can then localize that information or that reporting and help inform lawmakers and the public about what's going on and how their locality fits within the context of this movement across the country. So we feel like that's a promising way to support members and bring our message out. And we will always be committed to our core issues and working through to make news media a stronger industry in our region. So if you just checking in for questions or comments, anything you'd like to hear a little bit more about, I am open. Nothing? All right. Well then, thank you so much for coming out and meeting with us today. I wish you the best. In just a scant hour, we'll be hosting the broadcast for the next section of MDDC Awards. That's going to be on our YouTube channel at MDDC Press. Just search MDDC Press on YouTube and you'll get to our channel and you'll be able to see all of our broadcasts. Tomorrow, we will be hosting a session on recruiting into the industry, what young journalists are looking for from employers and what employers and schools are hearing about the recruitment process and encouraging journalists to stay in the industry. In Thursday afternoon, we'll also have a session anchored by Independent News Media Incorporated about their Best of the Best program, which is an advertising initiative that's been very successful. So I hope to see you all virtually at those events, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions. My contact information is on the screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are welcome.